All right, hope you are well. So today I'm going to be diving into some behavior change stuff that I'm studying at the moment. So at the moment, I'm currently studying um, nutrition, sports and exercise nutrition, but it's all good understanding all of the science behind nutrition, the benefits, knowing the numbers in terms of the data on how to optimize people's health, but also how to optimize their performance and manipulate all of the macronutrients or nutrition as a whole. But a large part of that, in terms of how people can use exercise and nutrition as a health intervention, as a well-being intervention, rests heavily on like behavior change and what people do day to day and what separates people who are healthy and those who are not. There's a lot of interplay between environment, social environment, also your environment, your home, but just daily behaviors, but also like psychological factors. There's big differences between people who are healthy and people who are not healthy, or people who have achieved health goals and perform at a high level. There's a big difference psychologically between these two types of people. And science clearly shows the differences between that. So something I've been geeking out a lot about is motivation and self-determination theory and how that can help you understand your motivations and why you can do things or why you should feel like you can achieve certain goals and get to a certain level. So most people think like the secret to most people think the secret to change is motivation, but according to self-determination theory, one of the most robust behavior change models in psychology, it's not how much motivation you have, it's what type of motivation you're running on, right? And like I said, there's differences between people in terms of how much motivation they have and what type of motivation they're running on. And obviously, psychology is clearly explained or clearly defined it, right? So in this video, we'll break down why the quality of motivation determines long-term success and how to create motivational environments that makes health training and high performance feel automatic and not so forced or something that you're always fighting against to do. All right. So I've called this video quality over quantity, how to build motivation that lasts, and why high achievers fail at health goals and how to fix it. So moving on to self-determination theory. So self-determination theory is when a person or group make their own decisions regarding their life and how it's managed. It was created by Ryan and Decci, 2000. The theory starts with two assumptions. One, human beings strive for growth, and two, internal sources of motivation are essential. So in order to achieve growth, people need to feel autonomous, competent, and connected with others. And of course, coaching plays a heavy role in this in terms of getting people from A to B, but also developing their capacity for growth, developing their type of motivation, and developing their autonomy, but also as well as competence. And also you get the connected variable with working with a coach, someone outside of your normal day-to-day life. So briefly, self-determination theory postulates that human beings have three essential psychological needs: autonomy, feeling of being the origin of one's own behaviors; competence, feeling effective; and relatedness, feeling understood and cared for by others. These needs represent psychological nutriments that are essential for ongoing psychological growth, integrity, and well-being. So looking at the three psychological nutrients, we need to feel ownership, capability, and connection for sustainable motivation. These aren't like nice to have, they're psychological needs like sleep, food, water, and love, of course. So a tip for this would be, ask yourself, what would make this feel more doable or enjoyable for you? Like rigid instructions can help create structure for a lot of people, but structure needs to meet a level of adherence. If that rigid instruction is too hard for that person and they can't stick to it or find it doable or enjoyable, then we're not going to meet those needs of adherence. So support and subsequent satisfaction of these needs provides the basis for psychological energy that is predicted to and has been empirically confirmed to motivate the initiation and long-term maintenance of health behaviors. Needs equals energy for long-term action. When autonomy, competence, and relatedness are supported, motivation becomes self-sustaining, less push, more pull. So a tip for this would be, instead of relying on hype or pressure, focus on building a lifestyle and a system that supports these needs. So that might mean reorganizing things in your life, restructuring, making sure things are in your diary, and you'll prioritize certain behaviors that will improve this autonomy of competence. Think small, think small wins equals confidence equals momentum, right? And of course, this coaching plays a heavy, like a great impact on this in terms of helping people develop that autonomy, the competence, and having the support to actually maintain motivation for the long term. Now, I'm not going to read through all of this. You can pause the video if you want, but there's substantial amount of data showing the impact of coaching and how well it can help people develop certain areas, right? For example, maybe we can pick one out here. So goal attainment, coaching clients are significantly more likely to achieve their goals compared to those who don't utilize coaching, right? And obviously there's a source for this here. But as I've said, I'm not going to read through all of that. There's an overwhelming amount of data that proves this to be true. So we'll move on. The issue of quality motivation is central to self-determination theory, which is less concerned with how much motivation people have and more about which type or types of motivation prevails in goal pursuit. Unlike some perspectives that only posit the intrinsic versus extrinsic distinction, viewing extrinsically motivated behavior as invariantly non-autonomous, SDD proposes that extrinsic motivation can vary greatly in the degree of internalization, i.e. self-congruence. So that means if your main motivation is an extrinsic reason in terms of something outside of yourself, think material objects, then there's going to be a lack of congruence with the goal and that motivation, right? So the amount of motivation, all motivation isn't created equal. Controlled motivation, external pressure or guilt may get short-term compliance, but only autonomous motivation creates lasting behavior. And that means that intrinsic motivation is the way to develop long-term functional health, but also become a positive role model for other people around you. And also, if you're an adult, you might have children. Developing that intrinsic motivation can help you develop into a positive role model for your children, which will help them live healthier lives, right? A lot of people in society, they don't have a good role model in their parents for health and well-being because their parents didn't have all the information we have nowadays. So they may have led less healthy lives, had worse choices in terms of food, nutrition, exercise, fitness. So that is passed on to you as their child, right? And then you pick up their bad habits. And then obviously with more information now, you try to turn your life around, but sometimes it might be a little bit late to actually get to a really, really high level. Whereas if you started when you're a kid, you would get to a high level by the time you're 20, right? So if you can develop that intrinsic motivation, become a positive role model for people around you, you give them a much better starting point for their life going forwards. So a tip for this would be shift your frame from I have to I choose to. Link goals to personal values and identity, not just their outcomes. And of course, there's more data here showing how health and wellness coaching can help you develop all of these areas. One thing I've highlighted here is fitness. Working with a coach results in 3 times increase in the number of individuals achieving weight loss compared to alternative methods. There's also a lot of significant amount of data and people in high professions, sports people, stuff like that, executive CEOs, they all endorse coaching because they understand the value in it and the amount of ROI you get from coaching. So autonomous motivation is based on deeply reflected endorsement of one's behavior. When feeling autonomous, people perceive that their behavior emanates from the self and is self-authored, and they act because they find interest in or are challenged by the experience of behavior, or because they find personal meaning in it. What autonomy feels like is true motivation. It feels like willingness, not willpower. You're willing to do the work. You're willing to meet the behavior challenge to reach the goals and develop the lifestyle and the identity that is needed to develop yourself, develop self-mastery. So when someone feels ownership, they don't need convincing, they're internally driven. They become autotelic. Autotelic means is an activity is one we do for its own sake because to experience it is the main goal. Applied to personality, autotelic denotes an individual who generally does things for their own sake rather than in order to achieve some later external goal. Now that is taken from the book Flow. I'm not going to try to say his name, but I've been currently reading that book, really good book. So a tip for this is use self-inquiry questions like, what about this goal matters most to me? How can I make this more enjoyable or aligned with my values or the values or identity I want to grow into? The predominant feeling is what is sometimes referred to as willingness. I truly choose to and want to. By contrast, in controlled motivation, the predominant feeling is pressure, which is often associated with ambivalence, which is often, the pressure or controls that regulates the behavior can either stem from external rewards or demands or internal guilt, shame, pride pressures. Expressions such as must and should are typically associated with this form of motivation, right? Importantly, different types of motivation have been associated with different outcomes, and a growing body of research has demonstrated the importance of autonomous motivation for a range of health behaviors. To put it simply, okay, I've cut that bit off, not important. So the cost of controlled motivation. When motivation is driven by shoulds and shame, it leads to burnout, inconsistency, and self-sabotage. So a tip here would be to reframe internal scripts. Replace I should train today with I want to train because it helps me feel more focused and resilient at work. I want to train, I want to stick to the plan, I want to stick to these behaviors. I want to pursue this because it helps me develop the identity and personality that I have to become to achieve those goals that I want. So looking at self-determination theory mechanisms of action and intervention component techniques. So social environmental factors decisively influence cognitive, behavioral, and affective patterns exhibited in health behavior change processes. The most important social environmental factor within SDDT based motivational climate concerns the degree of need supportiveness or the extent to which others and the environment more broadly support versus thwart these needs objectively and as perceived by the individual. Social environment matters. Our environment can either fuel or drain your motivation. I'm a big supporter of getting into the best gym you can get because the social environment is way better than trying to save money and using a cheap gym, and then you're not motivated because of the environment. But if you go into a better gym that costs a bit more, the environment's going to be better and you're going to be way more motivated. All right, so that's putting yourself in a better social environment because it matters. And again, putting yourself in a coaching environment, it significantly increases your chances of developing the behavior change needed. So our environment can either fuel or drain your motivation. The people and the systems around you either support or stifle your autonomy, competence, and relatedness. So a tip here will be build a supportive environment, celebrate small wins, check in without judgment, utilize choices and options. Now, we must realize motivation isn't something you wait for, it's something you create by meeting your psychological needs. And obviously, the three key areas here are competence, autonomy, relatedness. Focus less on pushing harder and more on aligning your goals with who you are or who you want to grow into and what sort of self-mastery you want to develop into. So looking at the key component techniques of psychological need supports, there are three areas we need to focus on here. So autonomy support, that being relevance by providing a clear and meaningful rationale for activities, facilitating self-endorsement, respect by acknowledging the importance of clients' perspective, feelings, and agenda, choice by encouraging clients to follow their own interests and providing options whenever possible. Avoidance of control by not using coercive, authoritarian, or guilt-inducing language or methods. So obviously this is framed from the perspective of coaching, but also this can help you understand what sort of support and environments and psychological needs you need to actually develop into a state of self-mastery. So a tip here would be to reinforce meaningful rationale, logical and sensible. So obviously that helps with directing coaching practice because that person has to feel like they develop autonomy from the coaching process. So for me, for example, a key area I try to do is teach and impart knowledge on the clients with the resources I provide to them by helping them to develop autonomy. They must understand and reinforce meaningful rationale as to why they're doing things, and that helps to pillar up this autonomy support. So obviously, increasing protein will help you feel more energized, recover faster, and stay mentally sharp during long work days. What do I think might be most realistic this week? Yeah. Moving on to structure support for competence. Clarity of expectations by collaboratively setting realistic goals and discussing what to expect and not expect from the behavior linked outcomes. Optimal challenge by tailoring strategies and goals to individuals. Skills, feedback, offering clear and relevant information feedback. For example, on goal progress, in a non-judgmental manner, provision of instrumental and practical skills training, guidance, and support. So one area I've come up with, or one issue I've seen a lot over the past year is when people are discussing coaching or discussing the idea of coaching, they feel like they have to get to a certain level before they can have a coach. But that's not how it works, because coaching works collaboratively with you, and you start by starting where you are, providing with optimal challenge for you at that time, and then developing going forwards, right? Developing your skill, right? Training is skill development. Coaching is skill development. So it doesn't matter where you start, even if you think you're at the top, there's always more to be achieved. And if you feel like you're down as a novice, then you don't need to wait to have a coach. Why are you waiting when you could be optimally challenged by having coaching in place? So I've never really understood why people think like that. So a tip for that, give me 1 second, I'm just going to close this. So a tip for that would be clarity of expectations, being realistic about weekly goals. Results take time, so consistency of the minimum requirement is more fruitful than trying to do it all and burning out. And again, that's something I see with clients a lot. They try to do too much, they burn out, and then they have a week of nothing, and then they try to go through the snowball. We just need to start with the minimum requirement or the minimum effective dose and build fruitful return from that, and then we can worry about adding more in later. So for example, a common tactic I use with clients is just starting with training 2 to 3 days and then building from there. Sometimes clients come on board with me and they're training 5-6 times a week. I'm like, bro, that's way too much. Like, you're trying to do too much, and you've been doing that much and not getting the results you want. So let's scale it back to 3 days, start there, start getting results from that, and then we can play another card in the deck later. So in terms of optimal challenge, focus on challenging yourself with what seems just outside your achievability. Trying to do too much leads to burnout. Finally, involvement support for relatedness. Empathy by attempting to see the situation through the client's perspective. Affection by displaying genuine appreciation and concern for the person. Attunement through paying careful attention to and gathering knowledge about the person. Dedication of resources through volunteering time and energy. Dependability through availability in case of need. Now, this is a massive area that I'm trying to develop and have continued to develop within my coaching process, right? Multiple point check-ins, checking in how the client's feeling across the week at regular intervals, imparting resources and knowledge into the person if they need it, and always just trying to understand their situation, but also making sure you're gathering a lot of knowledge and information and data from the person so you understand how they're responding to things and how they're progressing, right? So a tip for this would be consistent with your check-ins and be responsive when you need support, feedback, or are in the process of communication. Engagement is key to develop this involvement support, right? So finally, finishing up, just leave you with a quote and some information from Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt. Yeah, that's it. Couldn't say his name right. So the former CEO of Google frequently emphasized the importance of coaching and mentoring, particularly for leaders. He famously stated, "Everyone needs a coach." I also believe that. He highlighted that coaches offer a valuable external perspective, helping individuals see themselves as others see them and identify areas for improvement. He also stressed that coaches like Bill Campbell can provide crucial support and guidance to help individuals excel. Along with figures like Bill Gates, strongly advocates for the idea that coaching is not just for athletes or performers, but for anyone striving for improvement, including leaders and executives. A coach's primary role is to offer an objective viewpoint, which can be difficult for individuals to achieve on their own. Okay, hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you on the next one.